Welcome back to Keep It Real Boxing. This is Cypher Box. Okay, so I haven't done a lot of videos lately in the last few weeks. I've been doing Fight Night Rewinds, but not really talking about anything regarding news and topics and stuff that have been going on in the sport. So I thought I'd do a few, videos this week, catch-up videos. Hopefully I can get as many of them done. And kind of just breaking it down into divisions. And the division I wanted to start with was the middleweight division at this moment in time, and talk about kind of like the current champions and contenders and challengers, etc. and stuff like that, and give my views and thoughts on where the middleweight division stands right now as we speak. So let's start with who are the current champions. Alright, so we got Canelo Alvarez, obviously, who's holding the WBA, WBC and Ring Magazine belt. We've got Daniel Jacobs, who recently beat Sergey Devenchenko. He's holding the IBF belt. We've got Demetrius Andrade, who won the vacant WBO belt. He's holding the WBO championship of the middleweight title. And we've got, obviously, Rob Bryant, who beat Murat a few weeks ago, who's holding the WBA regular version of the belt. And then you got Jamal Charlo, he's holding a interim belt for the WBC. You've got also then the mandatory challengers, or the guys who are going to be competing for the mandatory position for the Canelo Alvarez's WBC belt, which is Jamal Charlo and Triple G. And then we've got Billy Joe Saunders, who's now been put on a 6-month suspension by the WBO for his failed drug test. And I am going to talk about Billy Joe, but not yet. I'm probably talking about him more at the end of the video. But that's where the middleweight division stands at this moment in time in terms of champions and mandatory challengers, or the more well-known and documented stories when it comes to the middleweight division anyway. So I was thinking about where do I want to start with the middleweight division at the moment, and I thought there's no better place to start than Jermall Charlo. Now with Jermall Charlo, you could say he's been maybe messed about and put on the shelf a little bit regards to his assault on the middleweight division, or what you would call his challenge to the champions as well in the division. Now let's go back when Jamal Charlo, first appeared in the middleweight division after leaving the 154-pound division and vacating his IBF title at 154. He fought Hugo Centeno Jr., which was supposed to be considered a WBC final eliminator. He won that fight, of course. Don't get me wrong, Centeno wasn't the greatest opponent. I'm not going to lie. He had a leg injury or whatever it was. But end of the day, he won that fight and he became the mandatory challenger. Okay. Now we all know that his shot for the WBC belt, which was at that time being held by Gennady Golovkin, he was the unified champion, recognized unified champion at middleweight, was held back. Jamal Charlo's shot was held back because of the first fight between Canelo and Triple G, right, back in 2017, September 2017. Then he was told to wait again until Canelo versus Triple G 2 happened in May of 2018. Of course, the fight never took place in May because Canelo Alvarez failed a drug test. Then he got told to wait again. Right, he had to wait aside again because Canelo and Triple G wanted to reschedule their fight they were supposed to have in May 2018 and reschedule it for September of 2018, which, as you all know, Canelo Alvarez won the fight and was declared the new unified middleweight champion of the world. Okay, since then, obviously, the WBC had their WBC annual convention, and they announced that Jamal Charlo and Triple G would have to fight each other in a final eliminator for Canelo Alvarez's WBC belt. Now, of course, they've got till January to obviously agree the fight and make the fight and all that sort of stuff. And if the fight doesn't get made by January, from what I understand, what I've read over the few weeks, is the WBC will then, at that point, if nothing's happened, they will order and mandate the fight, and it will probably end up going to a purse bid between Charlo and Triple G. Now, what makes me laugh about this whole situation is that Jamal Charlo was already declared the WBC mandatory challenger for their middleweight title. And, this is probably where the WBC are doing their usual don't get me wrong, all boxing commissions, all boxing organisations, all 4 major boxing organisations are guilty of doing this. The WBC aren't the only one, but it comes down to a matter of money. Now, they obviously want to make, obviously they need to appease Jamal Charlo, but at the same time, they want to make a third money fight, a big money fight between Triple G and Canelo Alvarez. You know, because there's a lot of money in that third fight. Whether we want to see it or not, that's another matter altogether. You will pay to watch it though, let's be honest. Okay? And the best way of doing that is by having Jamal Charlo and Triple G fight each other again. Now, if I remember right, Mauricio Suleiman and the WBC stated that the winner of Triple G and Canelo Alvarez would have to fight Jamal Charlo next. Okay, now this is what they said before the second fight in September between Triple G and Canelo Alvarez. But now they've flipped on the story and turned around and said, no, we're going to make it a final eliminator between Charlo and Triple G, which makes me think, like, how long does Jamal Charlo have to wait for his shot at the WBC title and at Canelo Alvarez or even Triple G? You know, depending who won that fight, if that makes sense, yeah? But how long does the guy have to keep sitting on the shelf waiting, right? Now, it's also interesting that Triple G's team have kind of been at the WBC convention, and you've all probably seen it, where Tom Loeffler, the promoter of Triple G, kind of protested at the fact that they've ordered this, or they've made this final eliminator fight between Triple G and Jamal Charlo, saying that they were hoping that the WBC would order an immediate rematch against Canelo Alvarez because they feel they won the second fight as well. Not only that, you know, we've seen Tom Loeffler, you know, do a lot of interviews where he's stating that, you know, Jamal Charlo doesn't bring anything to the table, basically. Right? Now, one of the quotes I have for you guys is he basically said, and he was interviewed by BoxingScene.com, and one of his replies to when he was suggested, well, what about Jamal Charlo? Because they were talking about Triple G's broadcasting deal with HBO is now over. Where is he going to go? And they were talking about potential matchups and fights. And one of the questions that was put to him was, well, how about Jamal Charlo? Why don't you do a one-fight deal with Showtime and it's one and done? And Tom Loeffler's reply to that was that Jamal Charlo doesn't make sense. That's not going to happen. Not only that, but Tom Loeffler was looking at another way to get to Canelo Alvarez, to get a third fight with Canelo Alvarez. And the way he was looking at that, the way he was looking of doing it was through the winner of Brandt versus Murat, and he thought Murat was going to win the fight. He said he was going to, this was before the fight happened, he said he was going to be ringside that weekend, and he felt that Murat would be the best route for Triple G next. He completely brushed off the Jamal Charlo situation and said that's the route we're probably looking at next. Obviously, those plans were ruined because he was banking on Murat winning that fight, and Murat didn't win that fight. He lost in an upset against Brandt. So, Triple G, the idea would have been that Murat wins the fight, they make a deal with ESPN, he fights Murat, he beats Murat, he picks up the regular version of the middleweight title, and then that's another route to Canelo Alvarez. But it didn't work out that way, unfortunately, because obviously Murat lost. So now they're looking for another way around Jamal Charlo to get to Canelo Alvarez next. But wait a minute, it doesn't end there. So now recently, this weekend actually, been watching a few Eddie Hearn interviews, and Eddie Hearn has talked about the fact that he's been approached by Tom Loeffler, or they've spoken to each other about a potential fight between Triple G and Callum Smith. Callum Smith, as you know, recently beat George Groves in the World Boxing Super Series final, super middleweight final, to take George Groves' super WBA super middleweight title. And apparently they've had a few, nothing official, but they've had a few initial talks about potentially making that fight. Now, as you know, Canelo Alvarez is fighting on, was it December 15th? He's stepping up to 168 pounds to face Rocky Fielding for his regular version of the WBA title. Okay, you can see where I'm going with this, right? And to me, it would seem that this is another avenue that Team Triple G are looking at to get a potential third fight with Canelo Alvarez. Yeah, they don't, in my opinion, they don't want nothing to do with Jermall Charlo, Triple G. Now, one of the things Tom Loeffler did say, he said, well, you know what, Charlo's got his fight coming up against Willie Monroe Jr. in December, was it December 22nd or something like that? Whatever, it's in December anyway. But he was talking about that. He goes, so we can't make that fight with Jamal Charlo anyway. But he did also say that, you know, Triple G wasn't looking to return until the spring of 2019. Here's my point on that. So what if Jamal Charlo is fighting in December? Jamal Charlo can have his fight against Willie Monroe Jr. In December. Yeah, and providing he wins that fight, there's still plenty of time to agree a deal, make a fight with Triple G, and have the fight in April of 2019. In my opinion, Team Triple G are clearly displaying they want nothing to do with Jamal Charlo. Nothing at all. They are avoiding Jamal Charlo. They don't want to get in the ring with him. That's the way I look at it. And also, don't forget, Bob Arum has been talking a lot as well. Bob Arum is saying that, well, you know, if he wants to move up to 168, he can fight Gilberto Ramirez at 168 at super middleweight. Triple G, that is, if he wants. So, do you know what I mean? They're looking for all these other options, Team Triple G, other than the option, the one option that we, to be honest, I want to see, which is Jamal Charlo versus Triple G at middleweight. Yeah, they don't want anything to do with Jamal Charlo, in my opinion. Now, I know what a lot of people are going to say out there. You know, you're going to get the die-hard Triple G fans. Remember, this isn't one of those, you know, my channel is not, I know I get accused of being a fanboy and biased and stuff like that, but I don't. I call it how I see it. Yeah, I call things how I see them. I call it based on the information that's provided and what people say within the sport. Promoters, fighters, managers, etc., broadcasters, whatever. Yeah, that's what I go on, and then I base my opinion on that. This ain't a channel where I support any particular fighter. I don't have favorite fighters. I've said this before time and time again. I'm a supporter of the sport of boxing, and I just want to see the best versus best, yeah, and undisputed champions in every single weight class. And we have that potential to have that make that happen here at middleweight as well, providing the fights can be made. Now, what a lot of you are going to say to me, which is what I've been hearing over the last few weeks, actually I've been hearing it for a while, ever since Jamal Charlo has stepped into the middleweight division, and it's the same thing Tom Loeffler, Abel Sanchez have been pushing, is what has Jamal Charlo done to deserve a shot against Triple G, etc., etc. Well, he is a former IBF light middleweight world champion, 154 pounds, undefeated in that division. But not only that, here's my question back to you guys, is what has Triple G's mandatory challenges in the past done to deserve their shot against Triple G? Let's be honest. Yeah? You look at some of the names, not just his mandatory challenges, but just his opponents, some of his opponents. Look like Daniel Gill, Antonio Rubio, Martin Murray, Willie Monroe Jr., David Lemieux, Dominic Wade, Curtis Stevens, you know, Matthew Macklin. You know, there's loads of names on there. What did they do to end the shot? So those excuses aren't going to fly with me. Those are just attempts to give the masses out there reasons to reject Jamal Charlo and his opportunity and his shot against Triple G or Canelo Alvarez for that matter. Can't see it any other way, to be honest with you. So, based on what I've heard and read from Tom Loeffler and Team Triple G, if the fight between Jamal Charlo and Triple G doesn't happen, then I'm sorry, I can only see it and call it one way, which is but hold on, I'm not done there when it comes to Jamal Charlo. Let's talk about Canelo Alvarez moving up to 160 pounds to fight Rocky Fielding for his regular WBA version of their middleweight title. Now, of course, if the fight between Triple G and Jamal Charlo doesn't happen, I'm guessing they would have to find another opponent for Jamal Charlo, right? Because it's a final eliminator that he's got to fight before getting his shot at the WBC middleweight title. Now, what's interesting about this whole situation is that Canelo Alvarez is moving up to 168. He's saying he's daring to be great and all this nonsense that you get these days, right? Now, on top of that, he's also turned around and said that he doesn't know whether he's going to return to 160 pounds. Now, if I stand correct, the fight between Rocky Fielding and Canelo Alvarez was made after the WBC convention. The WBC convention where it was announced that Jamal Charlo and Triple G would have to face each other in a final eliminator for Canelo Alvarez's WBC belt. Now, Canelo Alvarez will be using Rocky Fielding to kind of feel out 168 pounds. And if he feels good at 168 pounds, like I said, he's clearly stated he doesn't know whether he'll come down to 160, which means he'll probably stay at 168 pounds. Okay? Which means he won't fight Jamal Charlo. But not only that, there are other fights at middleweight for the unified champion, Canelo Alvarez. Okay? There's Daniel Jacobs, who's recently just won the vacant IBF belt. There's Demetrius Andrade, who's recently won the vacant WBO belt at middleweight. Okay? Jamal Charlo's not the only option. Those two guys, Demetrius Andrade and Jamal Charlo, both fight on DAZN. Now, with HBO shutting down its boxing program, you know, Jacobs' contract with them is up. He's had his final fight with them, which means he'll be going to DAZN because he's promoted by Eddie Hearn. We know this. So there's no reason whatsoever. There's no blocks in terms of making that fight between Canelo Alvarez against Daniel Jacobs or even Demetrius Andrade. No reason why those fights can't be made and we can't see an undisputed middleweight champion of the world having the best versus the best at middleweight. No reason. I can understand there being problems between Canelo Alvarez and Jamal Charlo because Jamal Charlo is a PBC fighter and he fights on Showtime, and Canelo Alvarez fights on, for example, on DAZN. So I can understand there may be a bit of a problem making that fight, but there's no problem with making fights with Daniel Jacobs and Demetrius Andrade and becoming undisputed champion at middleweight. No reason for that at all. And let's not forget, if Jamal Charlo was to finally be announced as the mandatory challenger to Canelo Alvarez's WBC belt, and they couldn't agree terms, then it would go to a purse bid, etc, etc. So the fight could potentially get made, or Canelo Alvarez could end up dropping the belt and then the fight doesn't get made, whatever, yeah? I'm going to give you all the information here, yeah? But Canelo Alvarez is clearly stating that he may not return to 160 pounds. And if Canelo Alvarez doesn't return to the middleweight division after his fight with Rocky Fielding at 168 pounds, then I'm sorry, I can only see it and call it one way, which is now remember, I did say, and I want to emphasize, if Canelo Alvarez doesn't return from 168 pound to fight at middleweight. Yeah? If he doesn't return, that's how I see it, and that's how I will be calling it. Okay, let's move on from Canelo Triple G. Let's talk about Daniel Jacobs, who recently beat Sergey Devrichenko in a vacant title fight for the IBF version of the middleweight championship. Now, after that victory, Daniel Jacobs said that he will fight Canelo. Yeah, it's a fight that he wants. He said he doesn't have a problem fighting Triple G again, but Triple G isn't a champ anymore. Yeah. And Jacob says he wants the champs. Yeah, he wants to unify. He wants to be undisputed champion at middleweight. And let's face it, Triple G, Team Triple G, Tom Loeffler, Abel Sanchez don't want that rematch with Daniel Jacobs. Yeah, we know that. I personally felt Daniel Jacobs did enough to win the fight. So did a lot of other people. In my opinion, if you go back and watch the fight, if you look at Triple G, when the cards were being announced, he didn't look very confident. And even when he was announced as the winner, you know, the face said it all. And a fighter knows when he's been beat. And he had the face, in my opinion, of a fighter who knew he had been beat, and he was kind of lucky to hold on to his titles. Now, in that situation, real champions, in my opinion, will say, right, let's do an immediate rematch. I'll show you, I'm going to beat this guy. They didn't even entertain it. They said maybe later on down the line, etc, etc. Had this been the other way round, the Triple G fanboys out there, Abel Sanchez, Tom Loeffler, etc, Triple G himself would be screaming for a rematch, demanding for it, and it would have to happen. But because it was the other way round, the rematch never took place. Yeah, and let's face it, they don't want that work anyway. We know that. Yeah. Daniel Jacobs has also stated that he wants to fight with Jamal Charlo. Now, there's been a lot of back and forth with Jamal Charlo and Daniel Jacobs in the past. And Daniel Jacobs turned around and said that he feels it's personal between him and Jamal Charlo now. You remember that altercation, or that verbal altercation they had in the hallway? I can't remember, what fight was that? Where Daniel Jacobs walks past and he goes, "Oh, I just came here at the right time," and they got into it. I'll link it into the description of the video. Hopefully I'll remember to do that, and then you guys can watch it again. But he's saying that since that happened, he feels he's tamed the lion, and he hasn't heard anything since from Jamal Charlo in terms of him mouthing off, claiming that Jacobs is avoiding him, etc, and stuff like that. He goes, since I've done that, since I've had that face to face with him, I've heard nothing from him. I've tamed the lion. And I think there's a little bit of a piss take there as well, because obviously Jamal Charlo and his brother, you know, they like to call themselves whatever it is, the Lions or whatever it is. They like to see themselves as lions in the sport and all that sort of stuff. But that's what he's referring to when he said that. I've tamed the lion, don't worry about it. And it's true. To be fair, I haven't heard a lot from Jamal Charlo when it comes to Daniel Jacobs since they had that verbal altercation in the hallway, right? Which was documented by, I think it was by Fight Hype TV. I'll put it in the description of the video for you guys to see it again. But I have to admit, you know, I haven't heard a lot from Jamal Charlo since then. He's not been talking much about Daniel Jacobs. Now, for me, Charlo, yes, I want to see him fight Triple G. Yes, I like to see him go and fight on Canelo Alvarez. But at the same time, Jamal Charlo is just looking for a title right now. He's looking for a title shot. So there's an option there for him to take as well. He can go the IBF route if he wanted to. Right? Not only that, he could potentially go the Demetrius Andrade route as well, because we know Demetrius Andrade has been chasing after Jamal Charlo for a long time. He's been chasing the Charlo brothers as a whole. Yeah? So, in my opinion, you know, Demetrius Andrade has been stepping up and saying that, hey, you know, remember when he went to the press conference, the post-fight press conference of Jamal Charlo, and he kind of stood there and he said, look, I'm not here to disrespect, I just want to know when we can make this fight. At 154 pound this was. And you know what I mean, they got into it a little bit. You know, we've seen a couple of verbal altercation at fights, you know, where they've gone and watched the fights and they've both been there. That's been well documented as well. You know, it feels like, to me, the Charlos didn't want anything to do with Demetrius Andrade. That's just the way I see it. Yeah, I can only call it the way I see it, guys. And since that altercation, that verbal altercation with Daniel Jacobs, I have not heard a lot from Jermall Charlo's team. Recently, though, some things have come out, I'm not going to lie, because Jermall Charlo's team, his coach, Ronnie Shields, has turned around and said basically that he believes that Daniel Jacobs is the one who's scared of Jermall Charlo. Right? And this is where it gets interesting. Right? So you got one side saying they're scared of the other side, one side saying the other one's scared of me, or I haven't heard much from him since I've challenged him a little bit and, you know, and had a conversation with him face to face. You know, end of the day, just get in the ring, let's see the fight. Now, yeah, there are problems with that because Jermall Charlo is PBC fighter. He is a Showtime fighter. I don't think he has a broadcasting deal with Showtime. I could be wrong there. Please correct me if I'm wrong. But if that is the case, then it shouldn't be that difficult for him to cross over, fight on DAZN, and take on Demetrius Andrade or Daniel Jacobs, in my opinion. You know, Eddie Hearn's making bids. He doesn't have to sign to DAZN. He doesn't have to sign a contract like a 3-fight contract or anything like that. He could do a fight-to-fight contract, which Eddie Hearn has turned around and said he's happy to do. And now I know there's a lot of this stuff going on with US boxing fans. They absolutely hate Eddie Hearn. You know, I've been very critical of Eddie Hearn and the whole AJ Wilder situation. I don't believe his side of the story when it comes to AJ versus Wilder. I think he's spinning a whole load of BS, in my opinion, when it comes to that fight. He is the problem in terms of that fight not being made between AJ and Wilder. So I don't. But I know a lot of people have a lot of problems with Eddie Hearn out in the US. A lot of the fans don't like him. You know, and the whole DAZN venture he's got going. But at the end of the day, we're boxing fans and we want to see best versus best. Yeah? So if Jermall Charlo doesn't have a broadcasting deal with Showtime Sports, yeah, where he like Canelo Alvarez does with DAZN, for example, then there shouldn't be no reason why he can't cross over to DAZN for a 1-fight deal to fight Daniel Jacobs or even Demetrius Andrade. Yeah? It's an option. You know? It is an option. And there's no reason those fights can't be made. He doesn't have to sit around waiting for Triple G and Canelo Alvarez. He can actually go after the two of the other champions, strengthen his position if he can beat those guys, and then he brings more to the table against the likes of a Canelo Alvarez, who's a unified champion with a WBC, WBA and Ring Magazine belt. And even he could shut up the Triple G narrative that what has he done to deserve a shot, because not that I agree with that, because I've already stated that earlier on in the video, but what he does do is still strengthen his position within the middleweight division if he could beat Daniel Jacobs and Demetrius Andrade. But those are difficult fights. I don't know about the Demetrius Andrade fight. You know, I know he had a long layoff. I wasn't too impressed with his fight, his little comeback fight in the vacant WBO title fight, where he picked up the title, but we would have to wait and see. But the Daniel Jacobs fight definitely is a difficult fight for Jermall Charlo. So it'll be interesting to see if that fight happens. You know, what does Jermall Charlo do? He's got a lot of options in front of him. He can wait to see what happens after Willie Monroe Jr. and whether the fight with Triple G gets made. If not, will Canelo Alvarez come back down to 160 after he fights Rocky Fielding at 168 pounds? Yeah? He can also make a fight. If he doesn't have a broadcasting deal with Showtime Sports, he can make a fight with Daniel Jacobs, a 1-fight deal to go on DAZN, a 1-fight deal to go on DAZN and fight Demetrius Andrade. Options are there. You can't say, you know, his options are limited. They're limitless for Jermall Charlo, in my opinion. So it'll be interesting to see what Jermall Charlo does. You know, but the same is for Daniel Jacobs. Yeah, Daniel Jacobs, the door's wide open, because he could fight Demetrius Andrade. I know that apparently them two are friends, but like, you're both holding titles. If you want to be undisputed champion, you're gonna have to put that friendship aside and get it on. Yeah. So Daniel Jacobs could fight not only Jermall Charlo, but he could fight Demetrius Andrade. Yeah. He can get a fight with Canelo Alvarez. That all three of those champions are on the same platform, fighting on the same platform on DAZN. You know, there's, again, for Daniel Jacobs, options are limitless. Right? That's the way I see it anyway. Now, this leads on to, obviously, Demetrius Andres. So let's talk about him a little bit. Look, his career has been... it's been a strange one. There's no doubt about that. He's had management problems, promotional problems, all sorts, yeah? Okay. There's always been a reason as to why, you know, he hasn't got the fights he wanted. He hasn't got this. He hasn't got that. I'm just going to say this simply about Demetrius Andrade. There's no reason now for him not to get the fights that he wants. He is in a prime position to do that. He's on DAZN at the moment as the WBO champion, middleweight champion. He's got Daniel Jacobs, who's going to be on DAZN as well, I can imagine, who's the IBF middleweight champion. You've got Canelo Alvarez, who's the unified middleweight champion with the WBC, WBA and Ring Magazine belts. Options are limitless. Like I said, the options for these fighters are limitless. Yeah, as far as I'm concerned. Same with Triple G, because he hasn't signed, as far as I'm aware. I know he's in, apparently they're in deep talks with DAZN. Whether something's going to come out of that, I know Bob Arum and ESPN are also interested in Triple G. He's still working out where his new home's going to be after HBO closed down their boxing program, right? But for all of these guys, yeah, the options are limitless. Yeah, it's that simple. You know, it's, you know, people try and make boxing, you know, these fights, making these fights complicated. The promoters try and make it out, oh, it's so complicated because of this and because of that, you know, and sometimes the fighters jump on that bandwagon as well. But fighters will only do that when they don't want certain fights. So they'll jump on with their promoter and encourage their narratives. But the simple fact of the matter, these fights can be made. They can be made quite easily. And as a boxing fan, I don't care. I have no loyalty to broadcasters. Showtime, DAZN, ESPN, Sky Sports, BT Sports. I don't care. As a boxing fan, I just want to see the damn fights. Yeah? I don't have allegiances to fighters. I don't have a favourite promoter, you know, who I'm going to defend with all my, you know, with everything I've got, you know. I don't care if it's Eddie Hearn. I don't care if it's, you know, Al Heyman and his promoters. You know, Al Heyman's a manager, of course. You know, Bob Arum, you know, whether it's Frank Warren, Oscar De La Hoya. I don't care as long as the fights are being made. We are getting the fights we want to see as boxing fans. That's all I care about. Yeah? And the options at middleweight right now, in my opinion, are limitless. There are no real excuses as to why these fights can't be made. Yeah? And if someone's coming up with a reason why a fight can't be made, as far as I'm concerned, it's an excuse. And that sounds off to me like you lot don't want the fight. Or you don't want these fights. And there's nothing stopping these fights, in my opinion. That's just my opinion on that situation of those current champions and top contenders in the middleweight division. And remember, if you're one of these fighters in the division, which I have just stated to you, the options are limitless, and you're giving reasons as to why fights can't happen, or whatever the reason might be, or pushing some sort of narrative, as far as I'm concerned, I'm going to see it as an excuse. And there's only one way I'm going to call it, if that's the case. Okay, so, you know, I'm nearly done with this video, and I quickly just want to touch on something before I sign off, and that is, I want to talk about Billy Joe Saunders. As you know, Billy Joe Saunders is currently serving a 6-month ban from the WBO, from what I understand. Yeah, he's now received a 6-month ban from the WBO for his failed drug test, where he tested positive for oxylifrine. My thoughts on Billy Joe Saunders haven't changed. If you saw my videos when he did fail the drug test, I called it as I saw it, and as far as I'm concerned, he's a cheat. What's pissed me off about the whole situation is that the amount of people that are coming out to defend Billy Joe Saunders at this moment in time. Okay, now, the one that's annoyed me the most is Mr. Tony Bellew. Okay, Tony Bellew recently came out saying that Alexander Povetkin is a drug cheat, Luis Ortiz is a drug cheat, Billy Joe Saunders isn't a drug cheat. He also stated in that interview that Dillian Whyte isn't a drug cheat as well. Okay, because Dillian Whyte years ago did fail for a banned substance, and he got a 2-year ban for that. It was an over-the-counter substance called was it Jack 3D, yeah, which is now banned here in the UK, right? All I'm going to say to Tony Bellew is double standards. Yeah, clearly showing double standards. Yeah, protecting British boxers and then passing judgment on any fighter outside of British boxing, in my opinion. His reasoning for his comment is that Billy Joe Saunders was given the nasal spray by someone in his camp, and he said, we're not going to mention who the name is, but basically saying that someone sabotaged Billy Joe Saunders' drug test. Here's my rebuttal to all of that, yeah? And the same with Dillian Whyte, where he was talking about the over-counter supplement that he bought, which was placed on the banned substance list. And at that time, you know, Dillian Whyte was using it for a long time, and suddenly it appeared on the banned substance list, and he took it, and then, you know what I mean, he failed a drug test and then was banned for 2 years. But here's my rebuttal. You are responsible as a fighter what you put in your body. I just watched a interview with Martin Murray on IFL TV with Kugan Cassius, and I'll link it in the description of the video so you can watch it for yourself. He himself has said it. He goes, basically what he said was, you're responsible for what you put in your body. He goes, I understand it's a little bit of a grey area and all that sort of stuff. He goes, I get it. He goes, but when I buy medication, you know, some sort of form of medication, or I'm taking some sort of prescribed medication, I always read what's in that medication, and then I will look at the banned substance list and see if any of those substances in there are on the banned substance list. And if they are, I won't take it. And if they're not, I'll use them. I'll use that medication. The same applies for Billy Joe Saunders. Yeah? Whether he knowingly took it and it was something that he bought to give himself the edge, or whether someone had passed it on to him because he did have a cold and he shoved it up his nose and took a good whiff of that nasal spray, doesn't matter. The responsibility lies with Billy Joe Saunders. If it was me, right, I would sit there and go, hold on, before I take this, I need to read what's in it. Someone pull up the list. Yeah? Let me have a look. Because that's your responsibility as a fighter. Yeah? The buck stops with you. Same with Dillian Whyte. Yeah? Dillian Whyte bought an over-the-counter supplement, yeah, which he'd been using for some time, and it wasn't on the ban list. Then it suddenly appeared on the ban list because something was added into the ingredients that a substance was added into the ingredients that was not allowed to be used by fighters. Yeah. Here's my point: when you buy, for example, when it comes to Dillian Whyte, when you buy a new bottle of that supplement, you should read it and check, has anything been added on here that's on the banned substance list? Yeah? And if it's not, keep using it. And you keep that bottle and the receipt to it. Yeah? And then the next time when you run out of that, you go and buy another bottle. Again, you check, has anything been added to it that's on the banned substance list before you use it. And if it has been added, guess what? You don't use it. It's that simple. I'm tired of hearing all these excuses when it comes to failed drug tests. I really am. The responsibility lies with the fighter. There are no excuses as far as I'm concerned. Simple as that. There are no excuses. And what Tony Bellew is doing here with his comments backing up his pal Billy Joe Saunders is classed as double standards. You either take a stance against failed drug tests and PED abusers, or you don't. Yeah? You don't sit in the middle and try and create a grey area. Oh no, these are my friends, so they're alright, they're not drug cheats, and they're British fighters, they're not drug cheats, but these guys over here are. No. What bullshit. Yeah? So I'm not buying all that crap from Tony Bellew. I think it's absolutely disgusting. I think it's double standards. You know what? And he should check himself, in all honesty, especially with the things he said in the past about failed drug tests and PED abusers like Povetkin, Ortiz, etc, etc. And as for Billy Joe Saunders, who knows what's next for him? Yeah, I think they're gonna try and sue the Massachusetts State Athletics Commission and all this sort of stuff. You know, good luck to all of that. But in terms of his career, don't know what's going to happen with him. Does he come back into the middleweight division? I know he's talks about having fights with James Dagale at 168 pounds at super middleweight. Does he move up and go pursue that? Like, I honestly don't know what's going to happen to Billy Joe Saunders. There's no doubt about it that Billy Joe Saunders is a talented fighter. Yeah, he's got skills. There's no doubt about it. Yeah, I'm not going to deny him that. But right now, I personally think, you know, a lot of people out there probably won't care whether Billy Joe Saunders returns or not. You know, if he does return, do it clean, show us what you're worth. But right now, I suppose his career is in limbo as in terms of what he's going to do. You know, does he stay at 160? Does he move up? Does he return at all? Who knows? Yeah, we'll have to just watch this space. Look, guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. I think I've been on for long enough now. Let me know what you think. As always, like, share, and subscribe. Until next time, this is Cypherbox reminding you to keep it real.